Have you ever been walking through the woods, a city park or green space, or even a cemetery and seen a spot where a group of insects were buzzing around a few inches above the ground? Chances are you encountered a congregation of one of our many ground nesting bee species. Most of our native bee species nest in the ground, but the how and why of what leads them to choose the areas they do to create nest in is still poorly understood. This is just one of the questions surrounding the ecology of these super cool bees that Project Ground Nesting Bee is hoping to learn about. Shannon talked with Dr. Jordan Kueneman about how everyone can help with this project on an episode of the Backyard Ecology podcast. Let's see what they had to say about these important native pollinators and Project Ground Nesting Bee.
So I guess we should say, how do you find ground nesting bees or even know if you got them there?
Yeah. So that's why this project takes such a large group. That's why we're reaching out to your audience. That's why we're trying to communicate broadly. Because if I were just to head out and try to locate ground nesting bee aggregation, I would have a very hard time doing that. I'd probably start by looking in cemeteries, start by looking in parks, start by looking in, I don't know, a university landscape that's like, okay, these people are out doing the same routine year after year. I'd look for south facing slopes. I'd look for, sandy soil types, right? But it's very difficult. But that's the reason to reach out to a broad audience, because it's like you have one, right? That we just talked about, right? You know where one is, but that's what it takes. It takes communicating with people, telling them what to look for. And then once they've seen it, they have an eye for it and they might see it again, but it's more luck, whether it's in your backyard or whether it's a place that you frequent. Like you may be walking through one of your favorite parks and be like, oh, I've seen them all over this part of this bike trail or all over this part of the road. I didn't know what those were. And so that's what we're looking for, people's sort of observations that they wouldn't otherwise know were important, that are.
So the two things that I look for, and you might have other suggestions too, are one, where it looks like somebody's taken one of the old-fashioned number 2
That's
pencils
right.
that
Yeah.
we grew up writing with,
Yeah.
shoved it into the ground and kind of wriggled it around a little bit, and then maybe it has, like, ant crumbles, swirl crumbles around, but they're bigger than ants.
Yeah.
So the hole's bigger and the crumbles are bigger, but it kinda looks like that. That's what I find a lot of times.
Yeah, that's very common, especially for Beletids. And, some bees don't really make the mounds, or at least when they're starting a new one, they do, but they immediately kind of, get dispersed. But bees are wider than ants, right? So you're right that that these nest entrances, these holes in the ground, are typically wider, but there are also very tiny bees too, and those are interesting. So one thing to also look for is just this hovering motion. Like, do you see insects kind of just moving over the ground, like they're waiting for something to emerge, or like they're looking for their entrance, And so you kind of get this observation of, oh, there's a lot of insect activity. Okay, what's going on here? And then either you might be looking at males kind of doing this hovering motion, waiting for females, or you might start to realize that there are bees bringing pollen back. And so you're looking for an insect carrying pollen back into its hole. And that's it. Once you found that, you've got it.
That's the second thing I always look for. It seems like I see, and I guess it's because the flight period of them is so short that I often see the holes before I see the flights and the patterns of them.
Right. Yeah. So you might go back to your aggregation a week earlier or 2 weeks earlier this year and say, okay, well, what I want to see is just the first emergence, or I want to see the males swarming, or I want to see mating, because mating is also very, fascinating to watch. And I want to see the females provisioning. So we come back, right? So, that period of time, which may feel like a week, may actually be a couple weeks, is once you start at the beginning and watch till the end, right? And so that's really what we want people to do. I mean, the iNaturalist project gives people the opportunity, once observations have been made in parks or in public spaces, to go to those and start to get a sense and start to learn, oh, wow, this is really cool to observe. This is just an interesting biological event going on in my neighborhood. Let's check it out. And then once you have that search image, you'll start to keep an eye for other aggregations or talk to people. They'll be like, oh, I think I've got something going on. And so by word of mouth, hopefully we can spread the message that these are important observations. And only by collecting many of them do we start to get a profile, a sense for what bees are nesting where and why.
Right. So we've mentioned the citizen science project, the community science project several times. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Who can participate? Let's start there.
Well, it's open to anyone that has made an observation. That's the starting point. So what you want to do is, well, you can join the project, and we encourage you because then you get updates as to what we're finding, and you can look on the INAT page and see where observations are in your community, and that's a great place to start. But we really encourage you to join the project and to make an observation, even add an aggregation that's already existing, add new data there because often there's some different species intermixed into that aggregation. Often there are parasites of those bees that are also bees, and we want to know those relationships. So we want repeat observations and to encourage people to go back and to observe them and to learn more about their phenology. When did they emerge this year? Is their aggregation the same size it was last year? So even
Mhm.
without finding your own to begin with, there are ways for you to get involved and ways for you to help build the corpus of data and observation that allow us to make conclusions and understand those bees better. And then take that further and communicate and find your own aggregations and start that process over so that you can start teaching people more locally what bees are doing. And then also that can wrap into how does this bee fit into the context of other nesting bees in a larger geographic space.
That's interesting because I've never really thought about there being multiple different species within the same aggregation. I always thought that it was just kind of everybody was the same species in there, except for your parasites that come and go. But
Yeah. Well, sometimes it is, and sometimes it's not. I mean, we're getting feedback from different aggregations where the area is actually sort of, you know, sectioned off. Like there's an area that's more dominant in one species, but right next to it, another species nesting. And so they're attracted to the same types of, requirements. Maybe that has to do with the floral resources that are close. Maybe that has to do with the sand that's available or the sandy loam or the soil types. And that's what we want to figure out. But it's fascinating that they're sort of living side by side, but in the same general area.
that's really interesting.
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, right. I believe that those would make really important places to conserve, right? If you can support a diverse group of bees and it's a unique location, something that we ought to know about and keep around.
And like you said, making those repeat observations can be really helpful too, especially year after year after year, because that's something I need to do a little bit more of. And Anthony and I, my husband and I, were talking about last year was that we really need to start paying more attention to the size of our aggregation because we
Yeah.
both got the impression last year that it was smaller than it had been in the years before.
Right.
So whether that was a one-time thing or we know the woods have gotten a little thicker there than they were when we first moved in, when we first found the site.
Hmm.
So is it because now it's getting too deep into the woods and we need to open it back up? That is an area we want to open back up again. That's in the kind of the long-term plans for that
Yeah.
area. But yeah, so there's all these questions just on that one little section that we've got.
And if they were there, but that habitat's changing, maybe they're moving someplace else close by. And so maybe if you can communicate with your neighbors or keep an eye around there, you might start to find, oh, this is the same species, likely it's from the same population, and they're shifting over here. That kind of stuff is fascinating. We don't know anything about why bees pick up and move, and if they do, where they go. So part of the same, realm of questions. Why do bees nest where they do? And how do we encourage them to nest where we might want them? Um, and so, yeah, keep an eye on your aggregation. Go back there and map it out on Google Earth. Get yourself some boundaries to kind of say what kind of area are we talking about. And then, if you're part of the project and it's a site that we want to follow up with you on, we may send you some resources to do some collections, and then you can send those materials back so we can get a better understanding as to why they're nesting there and who's nesting there.
Because that's one of the things that I've loved about community science projects forever and why I used to work with them so much is because one scientist or even a lab, a team like you've got, can't be everywhere. So it
Right.
allows everybody to be able to contribute and to help. And you get to do so much more because we're all working together to do that.
That's right. It was never possible before, we have these platforms to integrate observations and the community to help provide taxonomic identities and the ability to communicate broadly so we can get people to add these into a group project. And I think that's just a wonderful new way that we can approach caring for the pollinators in our landscape. So I'm very, very, excited by this work. And I love the fact that it brings in people from all backgrounds. I mean, we've got high school students out there collecting soil, and we've got retired gardeners that are fascinated, right? Like just the whole spread of folks that are making these observations or are willing to engage and to learn, often to learn about what's going on in their backyard.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, these aggregations are found everywhere. Well,
Yeah.
every in all kinds of different types of habitats and
Yeah.
areas because like ours is in a wooded area.
Yeah.
Um, I know other people who talk to me about finding them on the soccer field
Yeah.
or at a park or at the university or at the high school or wherever.
Right.
I mean,
Exactly.
yeah, in the backyard. I know people talk to me about the backyard.
I mean, that's what's so good about, we're talking about the backyard ecology, right? And being part of this community gives you the opportunity to learn, and you don't have to be worried about what's going on there. In fact, you could bring folks over to observe it and be like, check this out. Let's watch these guys for a little bit and just be a part of another world.
Yeah. And because they're solitary, because they don't have that heavy defense instinct, you
Right.
can run around barefooted in there and they're going to fly away from you. They're not going to sting you. I
Yeah.
mean, like I said, I lay 3 feet from them and they're more afraid of me.
They're just doing their own thing.
Our native ground nesting bees are just some of the native bee species you can provide for on your property. In fact, if you already have native plants growing in your yard, it is likely there are many species of native bees already visiting it. If you want to learn more about the bees in your yard, I highly recommend the book Bees, an Identification and Native Plant Forage Guide by Heather Holm. This book covers native bees and introduced species in detail, including size, when they are active, life cycle, where they nest, and how they collect pollen, and even has a section covering common native forage plants for each bee. There are sections devoted to many species of native trees, shrubs, and herbaceous plants that bees use. I will put a link to it in the description. This is an affiliate link, which simply means we get a commission if you purchase the book. No extra cost to you. We simply get a small commission from the seller, which helps support the channel. If you would like to learn more about the fascinating world of ground nesting bees, you can see the rest of the podcast conversation in this video, and be sure to take some time and enjoy nature in your backyard.